Hello everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
Everyone thinks my husband does too much. Have you ever looked at a happy couple and secretly wondered what really happens after the front door closes? I used to believe every strong marriage had a hidden secret, but I never imagined mine would confuse almost everyone who visits our home. The moment they see my American husband wearing an apron, stirring a pot of soup while I quietly wipe the kitchen counter, they smile awkwardly. Some laugh. Some whisper. A few even ask the same surprising question, does he always cook? I smile every time because the real answer is much bigger than cooking. And before this story ends, you may never look at love, marriage, or even your own daily routine in the same way again. My name is Emily, and this is my real life in the United States today. Every evening follows a rhythm that looks almost too simple. My husband enjoys cooking. I clean the kitchen after dinner. We never planned it this way. There was no written agreement. No argument. No competition about who works harder. Somehow, this became our balance. At first glance, it seems ordinary. But I have learned that ordinary moments often hide extraordinary lessons. One evening, our new neighbor stopped by just as my husband was finishing dinner. The smell of garlic butter, roasted vegetables, and grilled salmon filled the house. She looked at him, then looked at me holding a dish towel, and said, "You're lucky." I laughed politely, but inside my mind, I kept thinking about that word. Lucky. Was it really luck? Or was there something people couldn't see? In America, many people talk about equality. They talk about sharing responsibilities. They post beautiful photos online with smiling faces and perfect kitchens. But real balance does not happen because of social media. It happens on ordinary Tuesdays when someone comes home tired. It happens when one person quietly notices that the other has had a long day. It happens without keeping score. Researchers in family psychology have found that couples who regularly share household responsibilities often report higher relationship satisfaction and lower daily stress. The interesting part is not who cooks or who cleans. The important part is that both partners feel appreciated. That simple feeling changes everything. When I discovered this, I also noticed something unexpected inside myself. My English improved without feeling like study at all. While my husband cooked, he spoke slowly about his day. I listened. Sometimes I repeated short sentences. Dinner smells great. Can I help? I'll clean after we eat. They were tiny expressions, but they became part of my daily life. I wasn't memorizing vocabulary. I was living it. That is why I love slow English. Simple words become unforgettable when they belong to real emotions. Of course, not everyone understands our marriage. Some people think I should cook more. Others think my husband is doing too much. A few assume one of us must be unhappy. They only see 10 minutes of our evening. They never see the conversations, the laughter, the teamwork, or the quiet respect that fills the rest of our day. Then something happened last Friday night that made even me question everything I thought I knew about balance. It started with one unexpected sentence from my husband as he slowly put the dinner plate on the table. I froze. For a few seconds, I honestly didn't know what to say next, and that moment changed the meaning of our little kitchen forever. The truth behind our kitchen door. The sentence my husband said that Friday night sounded completely harmless at first. "Don't clean tonight." That was all. Just 4 simple words. But I immediately looked at him because he never says things without a reason. My mind started racing. Was he upset? Had I done something wrong? Was he tired of our routine? Funny how one ordinary sentence can create 100 imaginary stories inside your head. Looking back now, I realize that those few seconds taught me more about marriage than years of advice ever could. I slowly put the dish towel on the counter and watched him carry 2 warm plates to the dining table. He smiled exactly the same way he always did, calm and relaxed, yet something felt different. Outside, the evening was peaceful. Inside our kitchen, I could hear nothing except the gentle sound of the dishwasher and my own thoughts getting louder. Sometimes silence is much noisier than words. After dinner, instead of standing up to wash everything as usual, I stayed seated. It felt strangely uncomfortable. My hands almost reached for the plates automatically. My husband noticed and laughed softly. "You don't have to earn your place here every single day," he said. That sentence stopped me completely. I had never realized how often I connected love with constant effort. Somewhere along the way, I had quietly started believing that if I wasn't always doing something useful, I wasn't contributing enough. That belief is more common than many people think. Psychologists often explain that people naturally connect actions with value. We feel productive when we stay busy. We feel guilty when we rest, even if nobody expects us to keep working. Marriage can accidentally become another place where people measure themselves instead of supporting each other. My husband understood this before I did. He wasn't trying to rescue me. He wasn't trying to prove he was the better partner. He simply noticed something I couldn't see about myself. Balance, he explained, is not repeating the same tasks forever. Balance changes depending on what each person needs today. The next morning, while we prepared breakfast together, he handed me a cup of coffee and slowly said, "You always take care of us in ways I don't even notice." His words were simple enough for any English learner to understand, and maybe that is why they stayed in my heart. I quietly repeated the sentence later while making the bed. Take care of us. For everyday words, but they carried so much meaning. That has become one of my favorite ways to learn English. Real conversations stay with you because they are connected to real feelings. Life in the United States often moves very fast. Schedules fill up. Phones keep buzzing. Everyone seems busy. Yet I have discovered that the strongest families protect small daily moments that cannot be posted or measured. A shared breakfast. A short conversation before work. A smile across the kitchen. Those tiny moments quietly build trust over time. But our peaceful routine was about to be interrupted in a way neither of us expected. That afternoon, someone came to our house unexpectedly. After watching us for less than 10 minutes, this person made one bold comment that almost started a serious argument. For the first time, I wondered whether other people's opinions could slowly damage even the healthiest balance if we allowed them to stay too long. I thought I wasn't doing enough. One unexpected comment from a visitor almost changed the way I saw my own marriage. It lasted less than 10 seconds, but those words stayed in my head for days. "So, he cooks, and you just clean?" She laughed as if it were a harmless joke. I smiled politely, but inside, I suddenly questioned everything. Had people been quietly judging us all along? Had I been missing something obvious? What happened after that conversation surprised even my husband, and it revealed a truth that many couples never discover until it's almost too late. After our guest left, the house became unusually quiet. My husband went back to reading in the living room while I stood alone in the kitchen looking at the spotless countertop. The dishes were already clean. The floor looked perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be, yet my mind refused to settle. It wasn't because of what she said. It was because I had allowed one stranger's opinion to become louder than months of happiness. The next few days, I started changing my routine without telling my husband. I woke up earlier to prepare breakfast before he could. I secretly planned dinner menus. I folded the laundry before he noticed it needed to be done. I even tried to finish cleaning before he came home from work. At first, I felt productive. Then I felt exhausted. Ironically, the more I tried to prove I was contributing enough, the less peaceful our home became. One evening, my husband walked into the kitchen, looked around, and immediately noticed something was different. "Why didn't you wait for me?" he asked gently. I shrugged and answered, "I just wanted to help more." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of water and sat beside me at the table. Then he asked a question I will never forget. "Who are you trying to convince? Me, or yourself?" I didn't have an answer. That moment reminded me of something psychologists often explain. Human beings naturally compare themselves with others, especially after hearing criticism or seeing different lifestyles. Social comparison can quietly create unnecessary stress, even when life is already going well. We begin chasing an imaginary standard instead of appreciating what already works. Looking back, that was exactly what had happened to me. My husband smiled and reached for my hand. "You don't have to compete with anyone inside this house," he said. "We're on the same team." Those simple words became another unexpected English lesson. We're on the same team. I repeated the sentence several times later while putting groceries away. The grammar was easy. The vocabulary was simple. But the meaning stayed in my heart much longer than any textbook sentence ever could. That is why learning English through real conversations feels so natural. You remember the emotions first, and the language follows. From that day on, I stopped asking whether our responsibilities looked fair to other people. Instead, I started asking a different question every evening. Do we both feel supported today? Surprisingly, the answer mattered much more than who cooked dinner or who cleaned the kitchen. Just when I thought I finally understood the secret of our balance, my husband did something completely unexpected the following weekend. It wasn't another conversation. It wasn't another surprise dinner. He handed me a small handwritten note before breakfast. And what I read on that piece of paper completely changed the direction of our marriage in a way I never saw coming. One simple note changed everything. I expected the note to be romantic. Maybe a sweet message. Maybe a reminder about our weekend plans. Instead, my husband handed me a folded piece of paper before breakfast, smiled, and said, "Read it after your coffee." My heart started racing for no logical reason. It was only a small note, yet it felt strangely important. When I finally opened it, I found just one sentence written in neat handwriting. "Thank you for making this house feel like home." I read it once. Then twice. Then a third time. I never imagined 12 simple words could completely change the way I saw myself. For several minutes, I couldn't speak. The kitchen looked exactly the same as it always did. Morning sunlight came through the window. Coffee steamed gently from my mug. The toaster clicked in the background. Nothing around me had changed. Yet something inside me had. I suddenly realized that I had spent too much time measuring visible work. Cooking could be seen. Cleaning could be seen. Folding laundry could be seen. But creating peace inside a home? Encouraging someone after a difficult day? Making ordinary evenings feel warm and safe? Those things rarely receive applause, yet they often matter the most. My husband sat across from me and quietly explained why he had written the note. "People notice dinner," he said with a smile. "I notice everything else." Those words stayed with me long after breakfast ended. Modern relationship experts often talk about appreciation as one of the strongest predictors of long-term happiness. Couples who regularly express gratitude, even for small daily actions, tend to experience greater trust, stronger emotional connection, and fewer unnecessary conflicts. The science sounded interesting, but now I wasn't reading about it. I was living it. That same morning, I decided to begin a new habit. Every day, I would notice one thing my husband did that usually went unnoticed. Sometimes it was taking out the trash before I even thought about it. Sometimes it was filling my car with gas because he knew I had an early meeting. Sometimes it was simply asking, "How was your day?" and actually waiting for the full answer. Without realizing it, these moments also became my favorite English lessons. Real conversations at home are often slow, natural, and easy to understand. My husband spoke clearly, and I found myself repeating little phrases that soon became part of my everyday vocabulary. "Thank you for noticing." "I appreciate you." "Take your time." "I'm proud of you." None of these expressions felt like homework. They felt like life. A few weeks later, something funny happened. Our neighbor visited again during dinner. This time, my husband was making homemade pasta while I prepared the table. She smiled and jokingly asked, "So, who's winning today?" Before I could answer, my husband laughed. "There isn't a winner," he said. "There are only teammates." The room became unexpectedly quiet. Even our neighbor smiled differently after hearing that. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a speech. It was simply the truth. I thought that moment would be the end of the conversation, but it turned into the beginning of something much bigger. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I opened my phone and found a message that made my stomach tighten. It came from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. And the question they asked forced me to rethink everything I believed about what a balanced marriage really looks like. The message that made me stop smiling. Have you ever received a message that looked completely innocent until you read the last sentence? That was exactly what happened to me. I had just finished wiping the kitchen counter after another peaceful dinner when my phone vibrated. I expected a funny photo or a weekend invitation. Instead, I saw a question that instantly made my heart beat faster. Are you really happy, or are you just pretending? I stared at the screen for several seconds. Whoever wrote it had no idea how deeply those words could reach. For the first time in weeks, I wondered if people had been creating a completely different story about my marriage without ever asking me what was actually true. The message came from an old acquaintance who had only seen a few short videos and photos of our daily life. She had noticed that my husband often cooked while I cleaned the kitchen afterward. From those tiny moments, she built an entire conclusion. She assumed I was sacrificing too much. She assumed he was carrying too much. Most surprisingly, she assumed one of us had to be secretly unhappy. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I placed my phone face down on the table and looked around our living room. My husband was reading on the couch with a warm cup of tea beside him. The dishwasher hummed quietly in the background. The house felt peaceful. Nothing looked fake. Nothing felt forced. Yet one message had managed to shake my confidence for a moment. That night, I showed him the text. He read it carefully, smiled, and asked me a question I never expected. Do you want to explain our marriage, or keep living it? I laughed because the answer suddenly felt obvious. Sometimes, especially in today's world, people confuse appearance with reality. A 10-second video can never explain 10 years of trust. One photo cannot capture hundreds of conversations. Real relationships are built in moments that cameras never record. Family researchers often describe something called the fairness perception. Interestingly, couples do not need identical responsibilities to feel satisfied. They simply need both partners to believe the relationship is respectful, supportive, and fair. That idea changed the way I viewed our daily routine. Balance is not mathematics. It is mutual understanding. The following morning, while making coffee together, my husband slowly said one sentence that immediately became another English lesson for me. We take care of each other. Such simple words. No difficult grammar. No advanced vocabulary. Yet I repeated that sentence several times throughout the day because it perfectly described our home. Learning English through real emotions has always been easier than memorizing isolated words. Every meaningful conversation leaves behind language that naturally stays in my memory. Later that afternoon, we went grocery shopping at our local supermarket. Watching other families moving through the aisles reminded me that every couple has their own invisible system. One partner pushed the shopping cart while the other compared prices. Another carried a sleeping child while someone else searched for ingredients. From the outside, every family looked different. None of them looked wrong. As we loaded groceries into the car, my husband smiled and jokingly asked, "Ready for my famous pasta tonight?" I laughed and answered, "Only if I get my favorite job afterward." "Cleaning," he teased. Exactly. Neither of us realized that someone standing only a few feet away had overheard our conversation. Within minutes, that unexpected encounter would lead to one of the most surprising discussions I have ever had about marriage, respect, and what balance truly means in modern American family life. A stranger in the grocery store changed my mind again. I thought our conversation was over the moment we loaded the groceries into the car. I was completely wrong. Just as my husband closed the trunk, a woman who had been shopping nearby smiled politely and walked toward us. I assumed she wanted to ask where we had found a certain product. Instead, she said something that instantly caught me off guard. "I overheard you two talking," she admitted with an embarrassed smile. "Can I ask you one question?" I nodded. Then she asked, "How do you make marriage look so peaceful?" That single question stopped me because, honestly, I had never believed our ordinary life looked unusual to anyone else. For a few seconds, neither of us answered. My husband looked at me as if to say, "This one's yours." I laughed nervously because I didn't feel qualified to give relationship advice. We weren't perfect. We still forgot things. We still became tired after long workdays. Sometimes we misunderstood each other. Sometimes dinner was late. Sometimes the laundry stayed in the basket until the next morning. Our home wasn't perfect. It was simply honest. I smiled at the woman and answered as truthfully as I could. We stopped trying to divide every task equally. She looked confused. I continued. Instead, we asked a different question. "What does the other person need today?" Her expression immediately softened. That small shift changed everything in our marriage. Some days my husband cooked because he genuinely enjoyed creating meals. Other days I cooked because he came home exhausted. Sometimes I cleaned the kitchen while he folded laundry. Other evenings we both finished everything together in 15 minutes because we wanted more time to watch a movie. Nothing was fixed forever. Our balance moved with our lives. Relationship experts often describe healthy marriages as flexible partnerships rather than rigid systems. Couples who adapt to changing circumstances usually experience less conflict because they focus on solving problems together instead of defending. Fixed roles. Listening to that research once sounded interesting. Living it every day feels even better. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. My husband quietly reached across the center console and squeezed my hand for a moment. "You answered perfectly," he said. I smiled. "No," I replied. We answered it together. Without realizing it, I had just practiced another simple English phrase that became one of my favorites. "We'll figure it out." My husband says those 4 words whenever something unexpected happens. A broken dishwasher. A delayed appointment. A stressful workday. Instead of worrying first, he says, "We'll figure it out." Simple vocabulary. Natural pronunciation. A sentence I hear often enough that I never have to memorize it. That is one reason I enjoy learning English through everyday conversations. Real life repeats useful expressions far better than flashcards ever can. That evening, after dinner, we sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the sky above our quiet neighborhood. Everything felt peaceful again. I thought the stranger's question would become just another pleasant memory. Then my husband suddenly turned toward me with an unusually serious expression. There is something I've wanted to ask you for a long time, he said quietly. I felt my heart skip a beat. He wasn't smiling anymore. I had absolutely no idea what was coming next. But somehow I knew that whatever he was about to say would change our daily routine in a way neither of us had expected. The question I never expected to hear. The moment my husband said, "There's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time," my imagination immediately jumped to the worst conclusions. Was something wrong? Had I missed a sign? Was he unhappy with the way we had been living? Funny how the human mind can turn one unfinished sentence into an entire disaster in just a few seconds. As I looked at him sitting beside me on our porch, the peaceful evening suddenly felt very different. I took a deep breath and quietly answered, "I'm listening." His next words caught me completely by surprise. He smiled gently before asking, "Do you think we've forgotten how far we've come?" That was it. Not an argument. Not bad news. Not a complaint. Just one thoughtful question. For a moment, I didn't know how to answer because he was right. Life had become comfortable. We followed our routines almost automatically. He cooked. I cleaned. We worked. We laughed. We relaxed together. Everything functioned so naturally that we rarely stopped to notice it anymore. We celebrate birthdays, he continued, but we almost never celebrate ordinary days. His words stayed with me long after the conversation ended. The following Saturday morning, he surprised me again. Instead of preparing breakfast immediately, he placed 2 empty notebooks on the kitchen table. "Let's write down one thing we appreciate about each other every week," he suggested. I laughed. "Every week?" "Just one sentence," he replied. "It sounds too simple." Exactly. Sometimes the smallest habits create the biggest changes. Positive psychology researchers have often found that regularly expressing gratitude strengthens emotional connection and increases relationship satisfaction over time. The habit does not need to be complicated. A sincere sentence is often enough to remind both people that they are seen and appreciated. We began writing. His first note said, "Thank you for making every evening feel peaceful." Mine simply read, "Thank you for always making me feel like we're a team." Neither sentence was long. Neither used difficult words. Yet both meant more than expensive gifts ever could. Without planning it, these weekly notes became another beautiful way for me to improve my English. Because the messages were personal, I naturally remembered every expression. I learned phrases like, "I appreciate you," "You make life easier," "Thank you for noticing," and "I'm grateful for today." These are not textbook sentences. They are sentences people actually use in real American homes, spoken slowly, sincerely, and naturally. Weeks passed, and something unexpected happened. Our conversations became even deeper. Not because we suddenly had more free time. Not because life became easier. Simply because we intentionally noticed the good things before they disappeared into routine. One evening while cooking dinner together, my husband laughed after I corrected his pronunciation of a word from my language. We both laughed so hard that dinner almost burned. Moments like that reminded me that perfection has never been the goal. Joy has. Then something happened that neither of us had planned. While organizing one of the kitchen drawers, I accidentally found an old envelope hidden beneath a stack of recipe cards. It wasn't addressed to me, but my husband's handwriting was instantly recognizable. My curiosity grew stronger with every second. I looked toward the living room where he couldn't see me, then back at the envelope in my hand. I had no idea when he had written it, or why he had never given it to me. What I discovered inside would completely change the way I understood our story together. The letter hidden in our kitchen. I stood in the kitchen holding an old envelope that I had never seen before, and suddenly the room felt unusually quiet. My husband was only a few steps away in the living room, completely unaware that I had found it while organizing a drawer full of recipe cards. The envelope wasn't sealed anymore, but it had never been opened. My name was written neatly across the front in his handwriting. My heart immediately started asking questions my mind couldn't answer. Why had he written this? Why had he hidden it? And why had he never given it to me? I hesitated for several long seconds before carefully unfolding the letter inside. The first line immediately made my eyes fill with tears. If I ever forget to say these things out loud, I hope you find this one day. I stopped reading. Not because I wanted to. Because I needed a moment to breathe. The kitchen around me looked exactly the same as it had every other afternoon. The sunlight still reached across the countertop. The coffee machine quietly hummed. The clock continued ticking without caring that my heart had suddenly become much heavier. I continued reading. The letter wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with grand promises or poetic speeches. Instead, it was a collection of ordinary moments that I hadn't realized he had been quietly noticing for years. He thanked me for leaving encouraging notes beside his coffee mug before important meetings. He remembered the evenings when I stayed awake just to ask how his day had gone. He even wrote about the way I automatically turned on the porch light whenever he came home after sunset. None of those moments seemed important to me at the time. Apparently, they had meant everything to him. Relationship experts often explain something called emotional bids. These are tiny everyday actions people use to connect with each other: a smile, a question, a thoughtful gesture, or simply paying attention. Couples who consistently respond to these small moments often build stronger relationships than those who rely only on occasional grand romantic gestures. Reading that letter, I finally understood what those researchers meant. Without realizing it, our marriage had been growing stronger through hundreds of tiny moments that neither of us had ever posted online. When my husband walked into the kitchen and saw the letter in my hands, he froze. "Oh," he whispered with a slightly embarrassed smile. "You found it." I looked at him. "Why didn't you ever give this to me?" He laughed softly before answering. "I kept waiting for the perfect moment." Then he shrugged. "And I realized there isn't one." That answer somehow made the letter even more beautiful. Later that evening, I copied one sentence from his letter into my notebook because I wanted to remember both the feeling and the English. "You make ordinary days extraordinary." The sentence was simple enough for English learners to understand naturally. No difficult grammar. No uncommon vocabulary. Yet every time I read it aloud, I remembered exactly how I had felt standing in that kitchen. That is the magic of learning English through meaningful stories. You don't memorize words. You relive emotions. As the evening came to an end, I thought there were no more surprises waiting for us. Then my husband quietly smiled and said, "Actually, there was one more reason I wrote that letter." I looked up immediately. His next confession was something I had never guessed. Not once in all the years we had shared our little kitchen together, and it completely changed the meaning of everything that had happened before. The secret he had kept for years. I thought I already knew everything about my husband. We had shared thousands of dinners, countless conversations, and more ordinary evenings than I could possibly remember. So when he smiled and quietly said, "There was one more reason I wrote that letter," I expected another sweet explanation. Instead, what he told me left me completely speechless. "I wasn't writing it for today," he admitted. "I was writing it for a day when one of us might forget how much we are loved." In that instant, I realized the letter had never been about the past. It had always been written for the future. I stared at him without saying a word. He walked closer, leaned against the kitchen counter, and laughed softly. "You know how life is," he continued. "People get busy. Work becomes stressful. We get tired. Sometimes even happy couples stop noticing the little things." I wanted us to have something that could remind us who we really are before life ever had the chance to make us forget. That sentence stayed with me long after the conversation ended. It made me wonder how many strong relationships slowly become fragile, not because love disappears, but because appreciation becomes silent. Psychologists often explain something called the negativity bias. Our brains naturally remember problems more easily than peaceful moments because they are designed to notice potential threats. That means even loving couples can accidentally spend more time remembering the one disagreement than the 100 quiet evenings that came before it. Understanding this changed the way I looked at our marriage. We didn't need more perfect days. We simply needed to notice the beautiful ones before our busy minds overlooked them. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Without saying anything, I opened a small notebook and began writing my own letter. Not because anything was wrong. Not because I expected difficult times. But because I finally understood why my husband had done it first. I wrote about the smell of fresh coffee filling our kitchen before sunrise. I wrote about the sound of him humming while chopping vegetables. I wrote about the way he always asked, "Did you eat lunch today?" even on his busiest workdays. Those ordinary moments suddenly felt priceless once I saw them on paper. Later, I handed him the folded letter. He looked surprised. "For me?" he asked. I smiled. "For your future self." He laughed so hard that he had to wipe away a tear before opening it. That afternoon, while preparing dinner together, we found ourselves speaking more slowly than usual, almost as if we wanted to enjoy every word. It became another natural English lesson without either of us planning it. "I appreciate you. I'm grateful for today. We're lucky to have each other." Simple sentences. Everyday vocabulary. The kind of English people actually use inside real American homes. When language carries genuine emotion, it becomes much easier to remember. As the evening came to an end, my husband looked around our kitchen with a quiet smile. "You know," he said, "people think balance is about dividing chores." I nodded. But I think balance is about protecting each other's peace. I felt chills hearing those words because they perfectly described everything we had learned together. I believed our story had finally reached its happiest chapter. Then, only minutes later, the doorbell rang. Standing on our front porch was someone we never expected to see that evening. Holding something in their hands that would give our little story one final, unforgettable ending. What balance really means. The doorbell rang at the exact moment I thought our story was over. My husband and I looked at each other with the same puzzled expression before he walked toward the front door. Standing outside was our neighbor, the same woman who had once smiled awkwardly after seeing my husband cooking while I cleaned the kitchen. But this time, she wasn't there to ask a question. She held a freshly baked pie in her hands, smiled warmly, and quietly said something I will never forget. "I owe you both an apology." Those 7 words turned out to be the perfect ending to a story that had begun with misunderstanding, curiosity, and one very ordinary kitchen. She explained that after watching us over the past few months, she had slowly realized something important. At first, she believed one of us must be sacrificing more than the other. She assumed every healthy marriage should look exactly the same. But then she started paying attention instead of making assumptions. She noticed how my husband always thanked me after dinner. She noticed how I naturally refilled his coffee before he even asked. She noticed that neither of us kept score. Then she smiled. "You two don't divide chores," she said. "You multiply kindness." I felt tears gathering in my eyes because no one had ever described our marriage that way before. We invited her inside for coffee. As we sat around the kitchen table, our conversation drifted from recipes to work, from family traditions to everyday life in the United States. What surprised me most was how similar everyone's hopes really are. Almost every couple wants the same things: to feel respected, appreciated, understood, and safe. Researchers who study long-lasting relationships often reach a remarkably simple conclusion. Happy couples are not the ones who avoid problems completely. They are the ones who consistently respond to each other with respect, flexibility, and small acts of kindness. Love grows strongest in ordinary moments, not extraordinary ones. That truth perfectly described our little kitchen. My husband still enjoys cooking. I still enjoy making everything clean afterward. Sometimes we switch. Sometimes we cook together. Sometimes we order pizza because both of us are too tired to do anything else. Balance has never been about repeating the same routine forever. Balance is paying attention to what your partner needs today. Over the years, our kitchen quietly became my favorite English classroom. The expressions I remember best are not complicated. "Thank you." "I've got this." "Take your time." "I'm proud of you." "We'll figure it out." "I appreciate you." Simple words. Clear pronunciation. Real conversations. That is why learning English through everyday stories feels so natural. You are not only learning a language. You are learning how people connect, encourage, and care for one another in real life. Looking back now, I smile whenever someone jokingly says, "Your American husband cooks while you clean." I no longer feel the need to explain. I simply smile because I know they are only seeing one small scene from a much bigger story. The real story was never about cooking. It was never about cleaning. It was never about who did more. It has always been about two people choosing each other again and again through hundreds of quiet moments that most people never notice. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson I have learned. A balanced marriage is not built by perfect people. It is built by grateful people. Thank you for spending this time with me and sharing this simple story from our everyday life here in the United States. I truly hope these moments brought you not only a little English practice but also a little more hope, warmth, and encouragement for your own journey. That's all for today. I'll make many more videos like this in the future. Please subscribe so you won't miss them.